The death of George Floyd in May 2020 sent shockwaves across the nation. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the tragedy occurred, outrage spilled onto the streets. Peaceful protests were overshadowed by riots. Businesses were looted and burned. Governor Tim Walz faced immediate pressure to quell the unrest. His response, including the deployment of the National Guard, drew both praise and fierce criticism. The events of 2020 left an indelible mark on Minnesota. The riots, coupled with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, created a sense of fear and uncertainty. Many residents felt let down by their leaders, questioning the state's direction. The scars of 2020 continue to shape the political and social landscape of Minnesota. Among the most vocal critics of Governor Walz's handling of the 2020 riots is Max Rymer. A former resident of Minneapolis, Rymer relocated his family to a suburb citing safety concerns. He points to the destruction of businesses and the slow deployment of the National Guard as evidence of failed leadership. Rymer is not alone in his criticism. David Hann, chairman of the Minnesota GOP, accuses Walz of prioritizing political interests over the safety of Minnesotans. He claims that Walz's delayed response exacerbated the violence and allowed for greater destruction. These voices of discontent fuel a growing sense of frustration among some Minnesotans. The 2020 riots left many Minneapolis businesses in ruins. Small business owners, already reeling from the economic impact of the pandemic, faced devastating losses. Some were forced to close their doors permanently, unable to recover from the damage. One such business owner, Sarah Jones, owned a small bookstore in Minneapolis for over 20 years. The riots destroyed her livelihood. She recounts the experience with tears in her eyes, describing the feeling of helplessness as she watched her store go up in flames. Stories like Sarah's highlight the personal toll of the 2020 riots, a toll that extends far beyond property damage. Section 4. A Changed Minnesota. The 2020 riots had a profound impact on Minnesota, accelerating existing trends of population decline and political polarization. Many residents, disillusioned by the events of 2020, chose to leave the state. Those who remained found themselves increasingly divided along political lines. The sense of community that once characterized Minnesota seemed fractured. The events of 2020 forced Minnesotans to confront difficult questions about race, inequality, and the role of government. The answers to these questions remain elusive, but their pursuit continues to shape the state's social fabric. Section 5. The Political Battlefield. The political fallout from the 2020 riots continues to reverberate in Minnesota. Governor Walz's handling of the crisis remains a point of contention, with Republicans using it to challenge his leadership. The riots have become a rallying cry for conservatives, fueling campaigns and shaping political discourse. The 2020 riots exposed deep divisions within Minnesota, divisions that continue to influence the state's political landscape. As Minnesota moves forward, it must grapple with the legacy of 2020 and seek ways to bridge these divides. The path ahead will undoubtedly be challenging, but the pursuit of unity and understanding remains paramount.